In our previous file, we saw the mystery of the Mary Celeste, a crew that chose to leap into the dark Atlantic to escape a phantom threat. But if the Mary Celeste was a story of a sudden exit, our next case is a nightmare of a forced stay. Imagine being trapped on a floating wooden coffin for 301 days. No engine, no wind, no escape. This is the forensic breakdown of the Ryoei Maru, a Japanese fishing vessel found drifting off the coast of California in 1927. On board, the investigators didn't find a missing crew. They found a graveyard of bones and a handwritten diary that chronicles the most brutal, cannibalistic descent into madness in maritime history. October 31, 1927. The American freighter Margaret Dollar spots a ghost ship near the Vancouver Island coast. The hull is rotted, the masts are snapped, and the air surrounding it carries the heavy, sweet scent of decay. When the boarding party stepped onto the deck, they were met with a sight that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Human remains scattered like debris, and a small, stained notebook tucked away near the engine room. In this 30-minute investigation, we are not just reading a ghost story. Using 2026 maritime simulations and psychological stress modeling, we will reconstruct, day by day, exactly how 12 rational men turned into something unrecognizable. We will follow the ink of Captain Milaki's pen as it records the slow death of his crew and the eventual, terrifying silence of the Pacific. Before we open the first page of the diary and begin day 1 of the drift, make sure you are logged into the archive. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. In the Whispers Beyond Archives, we don't just tell stories. We analyze the shadows that history tried to forget. Are you ready to witness the 301-day descent? Archive Log, 1926. Subject: the Ryoei Maru. Transmission starts now. The Ryoei Maru was not a ghost ship by design. Built in 1923, she was a 100-ton, modern wooden fishing vessel equipped with a state-of-the-art 250-horsepower internal combustion engine. In the industrial era of 1926, she represented the pride of Misaki Port, Kanagawa Prefecture. Her mission was simple and lucrative: a long-range tuna fishing expedition into the deep, bountiful waters of the Pacific. At the helm was Captain Misaki, a veteran mariner known for his discipline and tactical precision. Under his command was a crew of 11 hardened sailors and expert fishermen, including a chief engineer and a navigator. These weren't amateurs. They were men who knew the tides and respected the sea. Captain Milaki carried a small, leather-bound notebook, the diary that would eventually become the only surviving witness to their 301-day descent. The day of departure was cold, typical for a Japanese winter. The sky over Misaki Port was a pale steel gray, but the spirits on board were high. The hold was stocked with several tons of ice, thousands of gallons of fuel, and enough rice and water to last the crew for a standard 40-day expedition. As the Ryoei Maru cleared the coast of Japan, the Pacific was already showing signs of atmospheric instability. A massive low-pressure system was brewing to the north, creating unusually heavy swells. But Captain Mikaki pushed forward. The tuna were running, and for a ship of this caliber, a winter storm was just another day at work. They reached their fishing grounds and began the harvest. For the first 2 weeks, the nets were full, and the mission seemed like a massive success. By December 20th, the weather turned violent. The ship was battered by 30-foot waves, and the engine was pushed to its thermal limits to maintain position. No one on board knew that within the dark iron heart of the engine room, a hairline fracture was forming in the main crankshaft, a microscopic flaw that was about to turn this 100-ton vessel into a floating prison. The Pacific winter had been relentless, and the Ryoei Maru was fighting a losing battle against a massive low-pressure system. At approximately 10 a.m., the ship was struck by a rogue wave that twisted the hull. Inside the engine room, the 250-horsepower engine groaned. And then, a sound like a gunshot rang through the steel. The main crankshaft had snapped. In 1926, a broken crankshaft at sea was a death sentence. It is the spine of the ship, Without it, the engine is just a massive, useless block of iron. The chief engineer scrambled to repair it, but the fracture was catastrophic. The Ryoei Maru went from a cutting-edge fishing vessel to a 100-ton piece of driftwood in seconds. Captain Mielke's diary records the moment with chilling calm. Engine failed. We are drifting east. Waves are washing over the deck. We have attempted to deploy the sails, but the wind is too strong. The storm has torn our canvas to shreds. Without power, the ship was seized by the Kuroshio Current, the black tide. This powerful oceanic river flows from Japan toward the North Pacific. Instead of returning to Misaki Port, the Ryoei Maru was being sucked into a vast, empty expanse of the ocean, where no commercial shipping lanes existed. As the world celebrated the arrival of 1927, the 12 men on board sat in a silent, lightless cabin. The radio, powered by the engine's generator, was dead. They were invisible to the world. Captain Misaki's entry for New Year's Eve is brief. Supplies for 40 days remain. We are praying for a passing vessel. The horizon is empty. A 2026 simulation of the North Pacific currents confirms their fate. At the speed they were drifting, they would not hit land for another 300 days. They had food for 40. The mathematical reality of their survival was already hitting zero, but the human spirit refused to accept it. Not yet. For the first 30 days, Captain Miki maintained a strict maritime hierarchy. Every morning, the crew scrubbed the decks and repaired the nets. They were still sailors, not victims. In his diary, Miyuki's handwriting remained firm. Morale is high. We believe the Kuroshio Current will carry us back to a shipping lane. They ate measured portions of rice and pickled plums, clinging to the discipline of the Imperial Japanese Navy tradition. But by late January 1927, the soul of the ship began to fracture. The constant thrum of the engine was replaced by the terrifying, rhythmic creak-creak-creak of rotting timber. The Pacific was no longer a resource, it was a predator. They spent hours watching the sharks that began to trail the ship, silent observers, waiting for the first man to fall. On February 3rd, the log records the last normal meal. As the final grain of rice was consumed, Miyake wrote, "The rice is gone. Today we begin to eat the bait. The fish are not biting. The ocean is empty." In late February, the Ryoei Maru drifted into the treacherous North Pacific fog belt. Captain Mitreki describes a white void, a suffocating mist that swallowed the sun for weeks. In this sensory deprivation chamber, dehydration-induced hallucinations intensified. The line between reality and the afterlife dissolved. Miki's log becomes fractured. The world has disappeared. There is only the ship, the silence, and the spirits calling from the water. This is the most haunting entry in the official 1927 Maritime Report. Records from a passing American freighter, the West Ivan, confirm a close-range encounter in the mist. The West Ivan's captain reported, "We spotted a Japanese vessel. We sounded our foghorn repeatedly and moved close enough to see figures moving on the deck. They waited for a signal, a flare, a wave, a scream. But the men on the Ryoei Maru stood like statues. They stared at the massive freighter as if looking through a ghost. They didn't move. They didn't cry for help." 2026 psychological modeling suggests a phenomenon called sensory gating. Broken by months of false hope, their brains rejected the West Ivan as just another cruel hallucination. They didn't wave because, in their broken minds, the ship wasn't really there. As the West Ivan's foghorn faded back into the mist, the last thread of human connection snapped. Once the fog cleared and the horizon remained empty, a sudden spike in despair hit the crew. Captain Mithaki's handwriting began to fail. The final entries of February marked the end of their identity as sailors. The spirits are calling us. We are no longer waiting for a ship. We are waiting for the inevitable. By March 1927, the biological limits of the crew were reached. The rice and bait long gone, they attempted to eat the leather of their boots and the hemp of the fishing nets. Captain Misaki's log records the first physical breakdown. Stomachs are cramping. The men are crawling on the deck because their legs can no longer support their weight. We are praying for rain, but the sky is a scorching blue. Around day 100, a miracle appeared. A large tuna was caught in a stray net. But for a crew in the advanced stages of starvation madness, their brains were no longer functioning on logic, only on pure, territorial aggression. The hierarchy of the Ryoei Maru shattered instantly. Instead of sharing the catch, two sailors accused the others of theft. A fight broke out on the blood-slicked deck, using rusted flensing knives and fishing lead. Miyoki recorded the horror. "We caught a fish, but the men have become beasts. They are fighting over the guts. Blood is on the wood, and it is not just the fish's blood." During the struggle, one sailor was struck in the head and killed on the Ryoei Maru. This was no longer a tragedy. It was a harvest. The 1926 forensic audit found that this was the definitive turning point. The crew didn't mourn. They realized the dead man was more resource than the fish itself. The log entries become coded and terrifyingly clinical as they began to process their own comrade. 2026 psychological profiling suggests the sudden high protein intake after months of starvation actually accelerated their mental collapse, triggering predator euphoria. By April, the ship had become a localized pocket of madness. Dehydration-induced psychosis caused the remaining crew to see ghostly feasts on the deck. Some jumped overboard, claiming their families were calling them from the waves. Captain Miyoki, clinging to his crumbling authority, watched the final descent. "Matsumoto has lost his mind. He is screaming at the empty horizon. Two others have begun to dance on the deck. The scent of blood is everywhere." By the 150-day mark, the ship was a floating charnel house. The 2026 stress simulation indicates that at this stage, the human brain enters a default mode of pure reptilian survival. Morality, friendship, and the fear of death are erased by the agonizing scream of the cells for protein. The Ryoei Maru was no longer a vessel. It was a biological experiment in the extremes of human suffering. Mikaki's final entry of the month reads, "The sun is burning. We have crossed a line from which there is no return. May the gods forgive us for what we have become." By May 1927, the Ryoei Maru was a silent, floating charnel house. Out of 12 men, only 2 remained, Captain Mikiki and the ship's cook. They no longer spoke. They lived in a state of catatonic shock, surrounded by the sun-bleached bones of their comrades. They survived this long only by entering a hibernation state, minimizing all movement to preserve the last calories extracted from the taboo feast. The diary records the death of the second-to-last survivor with a strange, hollow tenderness. Mikaki writes, "The cook is gone. He died smiling, talking about the cherry blossoms in Misaki. I do not have the strength to move him. He sleeps beside me now." For the next 100 days, Captain Michaki was the only heartbeat on a ship of ghosts. Knowing his end was near, Captain Michaki used his remaining strength to finalize his diary. This wasn't just a log, it was a forensic testimony. He crawled to the engine room, the darkest and coolest part of the ship, to protect the paper from the salt and sun. His final entry is a masterpiece of human dignity in the face of total horror. "I am the last one. The Pacific is vast, and I am small. To whoever finds this, tell our families we fought until the end. Tell them we are sorry for what we had to do to survive." When the Margaret Dollar finally towed the Ryoei Maru into a Canadian port, investigators found Captain Mikaki. He was slumped over his diary, his body mummified by the salt air, his pen still gripped in his skeletal hand. The 1927 coroner's report was so disturbing that parts of it were classified for decades. The 301-day descent was officially over, but the shadows it left behind would never fade. When the Margaret Dollar finally spotted the Ryoei Maru off the coast of Canada, they didn't just find a drifting ship, they found a stagnant pocket of reality. Despite the ocean winds, the air around the vessel felt unnaturally still, as if it were anchored in time. Inside, investigators were chilled to find that while the exterior was battered, the interior felt frozen. Objects on the captain's desk remained undisturbed, as if the laws of motion had been suspended for 301 days. To understand this, we must look at the 2026 forensic concept of a kekai. While traditionally a spiritual boundary, in a modern forensic context, a kekai is a localized reality collapse. It is a psychological and energetic perimeter created by a group experiencing shared terminal trauma. The Ryoei Maru wasn't just lost at sea. It was locked inside an invisible prison of its own making. When the crew crossed the line into cannibalism, their minds underwent a radical shift to survive the unthinkable guilt. They ceased to be 12 individuals and synchronized into a single, defensive unit. This created a state of collective dissociation. This mental shield was so thick that external reality, like the rescue ship West Ivan, could no longer penetrate it. They were physically in the Pacific, but mentally, they had moved into a private, dark dimension. This explains the white void, or the unnatural fog recorded in Captain Mikaki's log. The kekai acted as a filter of the void. Inside this barrier, time and sound behaved differently. When the West Ivan blasted its foghorns, the crew's brains, in a state of sensory gating, simply deleted the sound to protect their fragile survival equilibrium. They didn't wave because, in their desynchronized reality, the rescue ship didn't exist. This reality collapse also explains the haunted engine. Passing ships reported seeing rhythmic lights pulsing from the engine room at night, even though the fuel was long gone. These were residual echoes. The intense, desperate energy of the crew's will to survive, trapped in a loop. The ship had become a liminal space, a hallway between life and death. The Ryoei Maru sailed past salvation because, within the kekai, they were already ghosts. Their reality had unplugged from ours. When the ship was finally found in 1927, the kekai didn't just vanish, it collapsed, leaving behind a vessel filled with the cold, stagnant air of a void that had lasted 10 months. They didn't just arrive in port. They re-entered a world they had long since left behind. In the last weeks before the kekai collapsed, Captain Mikaki's diary ceased to be a maritime log. It became a record of things that should not exist. He described visitors, walking on the water shadows that mirrored the movements of his fallen crew. He wrote, "The fog is no longer white. It is filled with faces. They are not hungry, and they do not scream. They are waiting for me to finish the count." The most chilling forensic detail found in 1927 was a tally mark on the final page of the diary. Miseki had been counting the heartbeats of the ship. He recorded hearing the engine breathing long after it had died. This confirms the 2026 liminal space theory. The Ryoei Maru had become a living entity, a biological and mechanical hybrid fueled by the collective trauma of its inhabitants. On October 31, 1927, as the Margaret Dollar approached, the kekai finally shattered. The frozen time inside the ship caught up to the present in a single, violent burst of decay. Investigators noted that the smell of the ship hit them like a physical wall, the concentrated stench of 10 months of death, released all at once. Captain Mikaki was found in the engine room, his body preserved not by medicine, but by the stagnant air of the void. He had fulfilled his final duty. He had carried the truth back to the world of the living. The Ryoei Maru reminds us that the ocean is not just a body of water. It is a canvas for the darkest parts of the human psyche. When we are pushed beyond the limits of starvation and isolation, we don't just die. We create our own reality. We build our own kekai. The file on the Ryoei Maru is now sealed, but the archives are vast. If the slow decay of the Pacific haunted you, our next investigation will freeze your blood. Subscribe to Whispers Beyond Archives and turn on notifications. Don't let the next file stay hidden in the shadows. Our deep dive into the Dyatlov Pass incident begins in the next transmission. Archive Log, 1926. Subject: the Ryoei Maru. Status: archived. See you in the mountains.